Hello everybody and welcome back to another Hellbound Garage. Today we are back on the Datsun and we're going to be taking a look at some of the electrical that is going on with the Datsun. But first I want to take a second and apologize. I know I haven't posted a video in a hot minute, but that is because there's been a lot of things going on in life. This is the first time I'm able to get out into the garage and actually do something. So once again, I do apologize. I think I'm going to have to kind of reevaluate how fast I can put out videos. I'm going to probably go on a bi-weekly basis instead of a weekly basis, and I will probably say that over the next couple videos, but it's just there's some life changes that have happened that I now need to pay more attention to other aspects of it and not solely my automotive stuff. With all of that said, let's actually get into the automotive part. I've actually done a lot of this stuff, so it's going to be more of a showing and explaining than a time-lapse doing kind of deal. And it was just because it's very much the part that I did was kind of a pain in the butt, and it really wasn't anything to watch. It's just a struggle until you get it all put together. But let me show you what I'm talking about, and then we'll go from there. This is what I'm talking about being a pain. These black and red wires. Now they go through here, which part of the original Datsun harness did run through here, and this is all following original Datsun wiring harness patterns, but I relocated the battery back there, which we'll get to in a second. But in order to get that back there, I had to run the power cables up to the front, and well, I'm not going to run them underneath the car, and it just didn't make sense to run them along the driver's side frame rail. This part was nice and easy, but it's when you get into here that it becomes a problem. So in order to get that wire, which I guess I shouldn't call it wire, I should call it cable. It's 4-gauge welding cable. If you kind of do a little bit of research, a lot of guys use the welding cable because it actually has more wires per strand, I think, than your typical automotive wiring, unless you get into the super expensive high quality stuff. And having more packed in tighter means you don't have to run as big of a gauge. So I should be able to get away with a 4-gauge wire instead of like a 0-gauge, like your typical battery relocate. But it's not easy getting that wire through that fender, especially seeing my fenders are cut. So in order to get that to work, I had to use this guy here. And yeah, it's got this piece of string, and quite literally I tied the string to the cable and then fished this used to be a metal coat hanger through the fender, and then very nicely pulled the cable through the fender, and that way I could get it at the rocker panel. And a bigger reason that it was more of a pain than just running the cable itself is I have both a negative and a positive run all the way from the back of the car to the front of the car. It's kind of overkill, but I want to be certain more grounds, the better electronics run. So I'm gonna keep it like that. I've got a ground at the battery, which I'll show you in a second, and then I have the ground all the way up to the firewall that will then go to the frame rail next to the engine. And finally, I have the body harness that I made also running through that same exact path. So it's a whole lot of wire in a very compact space, which just made it all kind of a pain. And that's why I didn't want to show anybody the whole process, because honestly it was really boring and really tedious, but it took forever. We'll get to that guy in a second, but as you can tell here, the cables, the cables have a hard sheathing on them to protect them. Because my fenders are cut and they're welded, you're gonna have a bunch of welding imperfections on the inside of the fender that there's nothing you can do about. So in order to give that extra layer of protection and make sure nothing gets punctured and you don't have a short, we got this. There's also the body harness, which instead of going down right here, it's tucked up there. and that uses a softer sheathing, and it's this stuff here. I think it's like split loom or something. I don't remember exactly. I will list this stuff down below if it's anything you're interested in. It's all on Amazon, and I'm not affiliated with it. It's just the stuff I used. All right, now let's get to this guy right here. All right, so this is actually the front side of that switch that you just saw. This is by Blue Sea Systems. I've had this for a really long time. Originally, I had it mounted in my glove box like this, and this was when the battery was still in the engine bay, and I had to run power cables to my fuse panel that I created that was mounted to the inside of the car. But now that the battery is relocated to the back of the car, this guy's switched. Now this, if you go to like a NASA race, I don't think this actually qualifies as a kill switch, but I could be wrong. I'm not entirely sure. I haven't gone through tech yet. This is all in the hopes that when I do finally go through tech, I don't have any problems. So that switch has 2 inputs, 2 outputs that are not connected to each other whatsoever. So in my case, I have one side positive, one side ground, and then when I throw the switch, it completely disconnects both the power and the ground from whatever it's connected to. It's originally meant for boat purposes, so you could have 2 batteries hooked up to 2 completely different things, but have one kill switch to cut power to everything. So if you can see this, we've got so this is the power in and the power out, and then right here we have the ground in, and then up top it actually has 2 grounds out. One ground goes up into the firewall, and the other ground actually stays back here. That way I have a ground in both locations, and like I said, more grounds, electrical works better with more grounds. And if you notice the small eye loop on the power wire, well, that is because from that eye loop, it actually gets fed from this guy here. So main battery cable into this breaker that I also had that originally was mounted back here. I don't know if you can see the 2 diagonal holes. Originally I had that all mounted to the glove box, but now we're gonna have it mounted back near the battery. All right, so I personally hate battery boxes. I hate the plastic battery boxes. They look like trash, they look tacky, they look terrible. That's just my personal opinion. So I wanted to find a way to be able to mount a battery without having to deal with the tacky plastic box. Now, I saw somebody like Insanity, I think is how you pronounce it, Kyle Kuhnhausen's 240Z that was featured on things like Hoonigan. I liked his battery was mounted underneath the car. To me, that just seems like a lot more maintenance, and I don't want to deal with it. And then I came across Stewart Motoring, but I saw him pick up just a random battery tie down, then modify it to be held down in the back of a Datsun, and that's honestly what I did. So this is what I have going on. So this is technically a mount for like a Chevy C10. They have little fingers that stick up right here and there, and I've cut those off. Then I went ahead and welded on some tabs here and welded on tabs in the back. And then I also had to, because of where my fuel pump and things run, I had to cut this notch out to clear the wires going down to the fuel pump. I know it probably doesn't make a lot of sense without me putting it together, so let me put it together real quick, and then I'll show you that, and then we can work our way to the firewall side and show you what I got going on there. Everything's installed. Let's go over it. If you will notice right off the bat, this is the first time I've actually had this particular battery in this tie down, and well, if you can see the problem, it'll be fixed in the future. I wasn't thinking about this when I did that, but if you notice right there, and what this is, yeah, big problem. Anyways, this was the original battery from when this car had a L28, and when this battery was in the engine bay. This battery is almost 10 years old at this point. I will be switching to an AGM battery. That is the only way you can have this kind of holder without the battery box. So I will have to switch out to that. And at that point, I will just get a battery that suits my needs and not what is required for the vehicle with the original battery. Anyways, past that, you'll notice that the power goes from the post down to this breaker. This is just a main power breaker. When I had it in the glove box area, it was kind of a theft deterrent. These cars had just started to get hot a couple years after I had bought this one, and I really didn't want my stuff stolen, which is why I had the shut-off switch, or the cut-off switch, and the circuit breaker in the glove box, because the glove box locks, and unless you know what the heck you're looking for, most of the time it'll be enough of a theft deterrent to get people to not steal your car. They'll break in, but they won't be able to steal it. Anyways, now it's going to actually serve its true purpose, and that will be in case there's some kind of a random surge, the breaker will pop, not backfeeding into absolutely everything and destroying all the electrical in this vehicle, but you know. Alright, so from the circuit breaker, the positive then goes into the kill switch. On the other side, we do have the main ground that goes into the kill switch, and then from there it breaks off into the two grounds. Both the positive and negative then go through the fender and up to the firewall into this little guy right here. Now let me explain this. If you've never seen one of these or don't know how to hook one up, let's go into a little bit more of what this thing is and how it goes about doing its job. This is an OMP kill switch. Now this is actually a certified kill switch meant for race cars. Unlike the Blue Sea Systems, which is a kill switch that is meant for anything but a race car, this one actually has a sticker that you put on the outside of the vehicle that shows that this is actually an approved kill switch that can be used in any kind of race car. But as you can see, it's got a lot of things going on here. Alright, so instead of trying to just fumble around this and point out and explain everything, I kind of drew it out here for you. So you do have these two main studs here, which are representative in the picture. So you got your battery power coming into one side, and then it goes off to either your starter, alternator, or fuse panel, depending on how you have your main power run for the vehicle. And then the main thing for safety is the 4 prongs back here. They are labeled on the kill switch with a 1 and a 2, so you got 2 pairs. The number 1 pairing, you actually have one side connected to the power out going to your starter, and then on the other side of that you actually have your resistor, this little white guy here. I'll explain that in a second. For your number 2 pairing, you have the ECU power in, and then you have the ECU power out on the other side. If this is a carbureted vehicle, well, then you have your key power on, and then you have your the other side going to the distributor. That way it'll cut power just like it would for an ECU. The point of the resistor is to help bleed off excess electricity that's running through the system after you pop this kill switch. If you pop the kill switch on a standard, then there is a possibility for a bunch of feedback. You could have a runaway alternator, you could fry your alternator, you could fry the ECU. So this resistor helps bleed off all the excess electricity that's in the system and make sure that everything is safely shut off. I did forget to mention and draw on here that the resistor is actually attached to a chassis ground also. After all that madness, and it goes from the kill switch, it then goes to the other bulkhead up here. And if you're curious, this is what my entire setup looks like if you were to draw it down on paper. This kind of helps organize all the random mumbo jumbo that I've been talking about for the last 10 minutes. But we've got the battery positive and battery negative, positive going into the breaker, and then both the positive and the negative going into a kill switch. At this point, there is a negative or a ground that's run to the chassis right next to the battery, and then the other ground is run to the bulkhead at firewall. Meanwhile, the power that goes through the first kill switch then eventually goes to the second kill switch. After it goes through this second kill switch, it does go to the positive bulkhead that I have on the firewall, and I am using the positive bulkhead as a stud for my fuse panel. And like I said, my fuse panel has 3 outputs, so there's 3 cables going into this fuse panel, and then on the other side in the engine bay, the positive side will then go to the starter in my case, and then to the alternator. In some people's cases, they may just run separate starter and alternator wires. Just depends on how you're doing your thing, but this is my setup on paper. The final thing that I will mention is, if you look at most rule books, you're going to find that the kill switch is supposed to be within arm's reach of the track staff, so that way they can flip the switch and kill the power. If for whatever reason, if you get in an accident, you're knocked unconscious, they can neutralize the problem as much as possible without needing your help. Now, with it being in center console, this is where I could fail tech, but I do have an idea. One of my favorite Japanese S30s has their kill switch in the same location, and yes, I know American and Japanese safety standards are completely different, but I'm gonna try and make it so that way this particular way of mounting this kill switch will work with our American safety standards. And essentially, when I'm at the track, there is a eye loop, or a hole, I guess, is in the main key of the kill switch, and I'm going to have a wire run through that hole and then off to where the passenger side window area. I'll probably have a little bracket that'll just sit there. That way, if a safety tech needs to come by and kill the power, they can just pull the wire, it'll pop the switch, and then, you know, everything's neutralized. Is it gonna work? Not entirely sure. If it fails, well, then I will mount it on the driver's side next to where the steering wheel, and just call it good. But this was a much simpler, cleaner look, and I just really like the way that this particular S30 over in Japan looks, because it is a dedicated track car. So I'm just gonna go with it and see what happens. Who knows, maybe I technically have 2 kill switches, maybe I'll get away with it. I'm not entirely sure. But that is what I've got going on for the electrical safety system, as well as the battery relocate / cutoff switch system. Did I really overcomplicate my electrical system? Do you think it'll pass tech? I don't know. Hit me up with your thoughts and opinions on it. Either way, that's going to do it for this episode. I am sorry that it's a lot more talking and explaining, but it's electrical. There's not really a whole lot of excitement to it. And if you need to know how to do anything electrical, well, there's a million videos on YouTube. So with that, thank you for taking a moment and watching the video. Thank you for your support. Until the next one.
Do what it takes, I ain't making mistakes like that. I'll put it on your face to make you go take it.